I'm Doug Boynton, and you're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, highlighting the week's news and stories happening across our area. We have a fresh slate of stories for you in this week's program. America's armed forces are beefing up defenses against small unmanned drones. Cooperation is required between military and civilian agencies. It'll likely be required to adequately protect the U.S. from these attacks. Any type of internet search is routed through a data center. The highest concentration of them are in Virginia. We'll explain how that makes residents uneasy. And the Trump administration plans to overhaul FEMA. WHRO reports on what the lasting impacts of a shift could look like. We'll get into these stories and more, but first, this news update from NPR. Welcome in to WHRO's Weekly Edition. Navy barracks across Hampton Roads are about to undergo a remodel. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh reports the new defense bill allocates $380 million. Privatize and build new living spaces.
Navy officials have said it would be the largest attempt to privatize barracks in the military. 14 barracks would be turned over to a private contractor for renovation. A 1,500-bed facility would be built at Newport News Shipyard, and another nearly 4,000-bed facility would be built at Naval Station Norfolk. Language included in the Navy's request to Congress in the annual defense bill states the Navy has a staggering deficit in housing for junior sailors in Hampton Roads, estimating it is short 3,000 beds. The $380 million would be seed money for a $1.3 billion project stretched across the Navy's major bases in the area. If approved in the final bill, a contract is expected to be finished in August. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Now to town center in Virginia Beach, where a new neighborhood park could be built. The Virginia Beach School Board will vote next month on a plan to transfer land to the city for it. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson has more on that proposal.
Virginia Beach School District staff offered several options for the future use of the Bayside 6th grade campus, which will be empty this coming year. The school board considered them at a recent retreat. School board member Alveda Green says a park proposal makes everyone happy.
A park placement there would be more than appropriate. It will enhance the community. That community still has a lot of children. Also, Pembroke Elementary is next door to the property. I'm sure they would benefit as well.
The property is in Aragona Village, one of Virginia Beach's oldest neighborhoods. Residents there began efforts to preserve the area as far back as 2016, when rumors of development surfaced. Details of the transfer agreement between the school system and the city haven't been finalized. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
And we should mention Virginia Beach City Public Schools are stakeholders in Horetta, which holds the license to the WHRO stations. A controversial brewery that closed its Norfolk headquarters earlier this year is threatening legal action against local critics it says colluded to hurt its business. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reports the brewery has already sent cease and desist letters to its critics.
Armed Forces Brewing Company claims several people made defamatory statements, interfered with business relationships, and intimidated the brewery's supporters, according to cease and desist letters sent to 5 of its most vocal critics. Nathan Hernandez is the lawyer representing Armed Forces.
So the main concern is to ensure that there is not interference with the company's future business plans.
The company alleges there was a conspiracy to hurt the business's reputation here in Norfolk. It also claims someone leaked information about the brewery's possible relocation to Texas or Florida. Financial filings show Armed Forces Brewing was bleeding money for years. The Norfolk Treasurer's Office closed the brewery in March because it owed tens of thousands of dollars in city taxes. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
The military is scrambling to beef up America's defenses against small, inexpensive drones. The unmanned, weaponized devices are increasingly being used in warfare, but protecting the U.S. from drone attacks likely will require more cooperation between military and civilian agencies. Steve Walsh reports for the American Homefront Project.
In December 2023, airmen at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia watched swarms of drones fly over the base for 17 nights. The military scrambled jets and radar planes, used ground-based sensors, and looked for ships off the Atlantic coast. At the time, General Glenn Van Herk was head of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command.
We didn't have any luck detecting or further characterizing the threat. The eyeball was more effective on the ground than any sensors that I had as the commander of NORAD and NORTHCOM to defend our homeland.
Langley is home to the F-22, one of the U.S.'s most advanced fighters. Van Herk, who is now retired, can speak openly about the incident. He says he asked the White House for authority to track the signals coming from the drones, but was denied.
Current policy and law prevents the Department of Defense from collecting signals intelligence in the United States for fear that we would be spying on the American people or a perception of spying on the American people.
So the military reached out to the Commonwealth of Virginia and police in the surrounding cities.
DoD does not have authority outside the perimeter of the installation. That transfers to the local authorities. And that's one of the challenges that we face.
Around the country, local police departments have the equipment to detect the ID systems installed on newer commercial drones. Jump-started in part by the interest that followed the Langley incident, Virginia is now one of a handful of states that is creating an air traffic monitoring system for unmanned aircraft. It's part of a larger plan to develop the drone industry in Virginia, which the Commonwealth hopes is a potential multi-billion-dollar market, says Chris Sadler, director of the Public Safety Innovation Center.
The ability to give earlier warning to Joint Base Langley Eustis for local law enforcement and fire departments, rescue squads, that's just an added bonus to what we're doing.
The Virginia Flight Information Exchange started as a statewide map which shows drone pilots the most sensitive areas to avoid, like airports and military bases. South of the Washington, D.C. area, the Commonwealth is testing a series of cameras, radar, and other sensors which can track the drones themselves, says Virginia's contractor John Eberhardt with ATA Aviation.
In the areas where we have our kind of full sensor array and our system coverage, we're pretty good. We see almost everything in the sky, right?
The first phase covers only a sliver of Virginia. With more money, the state and local partners plan to expand next into the Hampton Roads area, which includes Langley and the largest concentration of naval bases in the world. A December 2024 memo from Air Combatant Command says the Air Force wants to use Virginia's real-time flight data as part of its early warning system. So far, the federal government hasn't offered any money to build or maintain the fledgling system. The spending and tax bill Congress just passed does include billions of dollars for drone projects. General Van Herk says part of the problem is that so many federal authorities overlap. The Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, as well as the Pentagon, they all own part of the problem but tend to work independently.
So we need a strategy that then leads to authorities, policy, and law put into place to ensure we can defend our homeland, defend our critical infrastructure.
We're just not there yet, Van Herk says, despite all of the attention over Langley and other drone sightings around the country. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans. Still ahead on Weekly Edition, conservationists scored a win this week. U.S. veterans and military personnel helped restore oyster habitats in Maryland and Virginia. But first, Democrat Abigail Spanberger holds a big lead over Republican Winsome Earl Sears in the race for governor. That's according to polling from Virginia Commonwealth University. WHRO's Ryan Murphy breaks down the numbers.
49% of Virginia voters surveyed said they would vote for Spanberger for governor, compared to 37% who would support Earl Sears. Former Governor Doug Wilder, who runs the Wilder School for Government and Public Affairs at VCU, says the widening gap should be a wake-up call to Republicans. He links Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's sliding approval numbers and overwhelming disapproval of President Donald Trump to Earl Sears' weak showing in the poll of 764 registered voters. The rising cost of living was by far the biggest concern for voters, followed by women's reproductive rights and immigration. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Spanberger isn't resting on her laurels despite that lead in the polls. She visited Tidewater Community College in Suffolk this week to announce her plans for the Virginia economy. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
Spanberger says her ideas for the Commonwealth center around growing business investment, the workforce, and trade opportunities for Virginia producers.
Virginia needs a governor who is focused on maintaining our trade relationships and finding new markets for Virginia exports, not cheering on potential trade wars or hoping it will all just work out.
The announcement comes as Virginia in July fell from 1st to 4th on CNBC's top states for business rankings. The impact of federal cuts and layoffs were a factor in the lower ranking. Spanberger says her plan will prioritize supporting the legal rights of laid-off federal workers and helping them find relevant job opportunities. She also wants to promote apprenticeship programs and dual enrollment courses for high school students, continue port investment, and increase agricultural exports. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
If you are a private property owner in Virginia Beach, you may soon have a range of options to address flooding. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports the city is launching an effort to help homeowners who face damage.
The roads into Back Bay in southern Virginia Beach don't stay dry very often. Standing near the Mill Landing boat ramp, Kyle Coolbaugh with the city says today's no different.
It's just a beautiful, warm July day. No rain, but we're still seeing those roads flooding because the wind is pushing that water in and it has nowhere to go.
City engineers are working on large-scale flood solutions like replacing outdated infrastructure. But Coolbaugh says the new stormwater extension program will help individual homeowners protect against rising waters by offering specific ideas and grant opportunities.
While we can't use public funds necessarily to improve flooding that's happening to private properties, the mitigation strategies give residents the tools they need to understand how they can mitigate flooding that they're experiencing.
Those strategies can be simple, like planting trees, or more expensive, like elevating your home. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
When you use AI like ChatGPT, or even when you Google something, your search is routed through a data center. These are giant warehouses for servers and data storage. The world's highest concentration of data centers is in Virginia, and some residents aren't happy about that. WHRO's Ryan Murphy worked with NPR's Emily Fang to tell this story.
In 600 feet, turn right.
I'm going down one of the major interstate highways that crisscross Northern Virginia. And driving with me is Elena Schlossberg, a data center opponent.
Can you see
this big gray building?
Yeah.
She's pointing out the huge data centers on both sides of the highway.
We're sort of that model of how not to do this kind of industrial development.
A decade ago, Schlossberg learned Amazon Web Services was building a data center next to her home in Northern Virginia, and she threw herself into stopping it.
And the data center industry came and crushed us.
Amazon is among NPR's recent financial supporters and pays to distribute some NPR content. And they're one of several companies that have made Virginia an epicenter for data. 13% of all data centers in the world are here. That's been supercharged by AI products like ChatGPT that need computing power. So about 70 more data centers, many the size of multiple football fields, are planned in Virginia. The centers support our computing needs. They also need huge amounts of water and energy for cooling. In Virginia, one utility company alone, called Dominion, is contracted to build 40 gigawatts of energy capacity for these new centers. Julie Bolthouse at the Piedmont Environmental Council, a Virginia environment nonprofit, explains what that figure means.
To increase it by 40 gigawatts is to almost triple our entire grid for one industry. And to do that for one industry is absolutely unprecedented.
Triple the max power production currently for the entire state. The power, the land, and the cost of these data centers has galvanized a not in my backyard movement against them. And many activists around the country are seeking out Schlossberg about how to organize.
I've talked to people in Boardman, Oregon, Peculiar, Missouri, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Maryland, Georgia.
One of the communities that recently came to her is in Chesapeake, Virginia, where my colleague Ryan Murphy has been attending town hall meetings.
Residents here learned of a proposed data center project just a few weeks ago, and they were concerned. Helen Messer's house is a couple hundred feet from where the data center would go. She's most worried about the very loud noise emitted by large-scale data centers.
How am I going to relax with something buzzing at me 24/7?
Within days, Chesapeake residents held a meeting at a church social hall to prepare their resistance. The developer behind the data project, Doug Fuller, also showed up unexpectedly. He got a less than warm welcome from residents.
How does this benefit our hearing? How does it benefit pollution?
Including Messer.
Why can't we move the data center to your neighborhood?
Fuller pushed back.
Me as a developer, create an asset for our city. Tax revenues will be in the millions of dollars.
Local governments in southeastern Virginia have been trying to shift their economies away from tourism and shipbuilding. They've spent tens of millions of dollars on high-speed fiber optic networks in hopes of attracting high-tech businesses like data centers. Still, hundreds of residents implored local leaders to deny the proposal. Here's resident Lee DeMoore.
Once they're built, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. If they violate the decibels, what are you going to do? Fine them $1,000? Man, that'd be like me asking you for a penny. I mean, seriously. Once this thing is built, it's all over but the crying.
Opponents showed up in force to a June City Council meeting.
Thank you. Members of Council, please prepare to vote. Please vote, and Madam Clerk, record.
When the tallying board lit up to show a unanimous vote blocking the data center, the council chamber erupted. Messer and her neighbors were giddy as they poured out of City Hall.
I will sleep better than I have slept for in months.
As resistance has mounted and gotten organized, more data center projects are being delayed or outright rejected. 16 projects nationally between May of last year and this past March. But a central tension remains. Use of AI applications is skyrocketing, and the data centers to handle all of that have to go somewhere. For NPR, I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm NPR's Emily Fang.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
A group of U.S. veterans and active duty military members joined the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to restore oyster habitats in Maryland and Virginia. WHRO's Barry Graham details the win for conservationists and clean water advocates.
The effort was part of a Chesapeake Bay fishing trip hosted by Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Armed Forces Initiative, which helps veterans and service members heal through outdoor stewardship. Participants helped process and bag recycled oyster shells, nearly $2.7 million in total, used to build new reef habitat. Oysters filter the bay's water and support fish populations popular with anglers. Organizers say the work helps both the ecosystem and the veterans who find new purpose in conservation service. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Overflowing toilets are hampering the USS Ford's recent deployment. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says the mother of a sailor worries about the health of the crew.
Pictures shared by the mother of a sailor on board the aircraft carrier USS Ford show toilets backing up and wastewater spilling onto the floor. The carrier left Norfolk June 24th. The mother asked not to be identified. She says it's a health hazard for the crew of 4,500 sailors. Each berthing area houses 40 sailors with a toilet and shower area. She did not know how many toilets were affected. The photos were taken within the last week. They show the problem worsening. She says the overflowing toilets were also a problem on the carrier's first deployment, which ended in 2024. The Government Accountability Office says in 2020 that the toilets on board the $13 billion carrier were undersized. To avoid backups, the pipes must be cleaned with an acid flush that cost $400,000 each time it's used. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
The Trump administration is planning to overhaul the Federal Emergency Management Agency. That's the country's main source of financial assistance after major disasters. The president wants to shift more responsibility to the states. Critics say that would make it much harder for communities to recover. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports on what this could mean for Virginia.
Last fall, after devastating communities in North Carolina, Hurricane Helene swept into southwest Virginia and continued its path of destruction, as CBS reported.
Historic floods from the mountains pulverized Damascus, Virginia.
You never think you'll watch your house just float down the road.
Roads and bridges were torn up. Storm waters flooded homes, businesses, and thousands of farms. 2 people were killed. After the storm, Virginia turned to the federal government for help. Governor Glenn Youngkin asked FEMA for more than $4 billion to aid recovery efforts. Now, Youngkin is part of a group exploring ways to overhaul or gut the same agency. President Donald Trump appointed the governor to the administration's FEMA Review Council. FEMA has already lost more than a fifth of its workforce this year. Trump originally pitched getting rid of it altogether.
I think, frankly, FEMA's not good.
But he's backed away from completely dismantling the agency after FEMA recently responded to deadly flooding in Texas. The debate centers around who is responsible for helping residents recover from disaster. The Trump administration argues it should largely be the states. Youngkin seems to agree. At a meeting of the FEMA Review Council in May, the governor said Virginia is prepared to shoulder a bigger share of disaster relief.
We're ready. We should be ready because at the end of the day, we're responsible.
He said states should turn to partnering with nonprofits and private industry to help. But many advocates in Virginia say that would not be nearly enough.
Virginians can't afford, both financially and in every other sense, to be left behind by federal government support.
That's Gabrielle Walton with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. The nonprofit is one of nearly 24 groups that recently sent a letter asking Youngkin to protect federal disaster aid. Emergency response is already led by state and local governments. Walton says FEMA helps by sending in experts and money. That comes in 2 buckets: individual assistance for property owners and public assistance for things like clearing roadways and rebuilding bridges. Walton says climate change is increasing the risk for more of these disasters, including in places not used to preparing for them.
These disasters are unprecedented often. I don't know how we can say we're ready for something with a scale we can't really imagine.
Helene is an example of that, according to Virginia Senator Mark Warner.
That would have bankrupted North Carolina if they had to do this on its own.
He agrees that FEMA needs reform. For example, its method for calculating financial relief often puts rural and low-income areas at a disadvantage. But Warner says there's a lot at stake if aid is significantly scaled back.
I just don't understand, particularly when it's a substantial disaster like Helene, how an individual state would ever have enough resources or be able to set aside enough money to really take on the problem.
He says the federal government canceled billions of dollars for local projects to help prevent disasters, including money for Portsmouth to improve a dam at risk of failing during a major storm.
If you don't do resilience planning, you're doomed to repeat time and again the same mistakes that lead to disasters.
Trump's Review Council is expected to make recommendations for changing FEMA this fall, around the peak of hurricane season. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Steve Walsh, Michelle Hankerson, Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Nick McNamara, and Barry Graham. Thanks, as always, to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO Reports podcast feed, and the WHRO smartphone app. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.